The USS Meridian drifted through the purple mists of the Veil Nebula, like a silver needle threading through cosmic silk. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, his weathered hands gripping the rail as he watched the swirling clouds of gas and stardust part before their ship. 3 years into their deep space mission, they had mapped 17 new star systems and discovered 6 planets that could support human life. But today felt different. "Captain, we're picking up something strange on long-range sensors," called out Lieutenant Sarah Kim from her station. Her fingers danced across the control panel as data streamed across her screen. "It's big, maybe 3 kilometers long, and it's not moving." Jake walked over to look at the readings. In all his 20 years of space travel, he had learned to trust his instincts. Right now, those instincts were telling him to be very careful. "Any life signs?" "None that I can detect, sir. But the metal composition is unlike anything in our databases. It's old, Captain. Really old." Dr. Lisa Park, the ship's chief science officer, looked up from her workstation with excitement dancing in her dark eyes. Lisa had joined this mission, hoping to make discoveries that would change humanity's understanding of the galaxy. This might be exactly what she had been waiting for. "Captain, if this is what I think it is, we could be looking at technology that's thousands of years ahead of ours." Jake nodded slowly. He knew Lisa was brilliant, but he also knew that curiosity could be dangerous in deep space. "Tony, what's our tactical situation?" Lieutenant Commander Tony Blake, a former fighter pilot who now served as their security chief, checked his instruments. Tony had survived 3 alien encounters during the border conflicts, and his experience had kept the Meridian safe more than once. "All quiet, Captain. No energy signatures, no weapon systems active. If there's anyone home, they're not answering the door." "All right," Jake decided. "We'll take a closer look, but we do this by the book. Lisa, put together your team. Tony, I want a full security detail. And everyone wears full environmental suits. We don't know what we're walking into." 2 hours later, the Meridian shuttlecraft approached the alien derelict. The ship was massive, its hull covered in strange symbols that seemed to shift and change in the light from their spotlights. Engineer Maria Santos piloted the shuttle with steady hands, her years of experience showing as she navigated between twisted pieces of metal that jutted out from the alien vessel's damaged hull. "There." Lisa pointed to a section where the hull had been torn open. "We can get inside through that breach." Maria guided the shuttle into position, and the away team prepared to transfer to the alien ship. Jake had insisted on leading the mission himself, bringing Lisa, Tony, and 3 other crew members. As they crossed from their shuttle to the derelict, their boot magnets clanked against the alien metal. The inside of the ship was a maze of corridors that seemed to follow no human logic. The walls curved in impossible ways, and the ceiling changed height without warning. Emergency lights flickered weakly, casting strange shadows that made everyone nervous. Tony kept his weapon ready, though he doubted human technology would be much use against whatever had built this place. "The air is breathable," Lisa reported, checking her instruments. "Oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, almost exactly like Earth's atmosphere. But that's impossible. This ship has been dead for centuries." They moved deeper into the vessel, their footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. Jake noticed that the symbols on the walls seemed to tell a story, showing images of planets and stars and creatures he couldn't identify. Some of the images showed what looked like battles, with great fleets of ships fighting against something dark and terrible. "Captain, over here," called Maria from ahead. She had found what looked like the ship's main computer core, a room filled with crystalline structures that glowed with a soft blue light. The crystals were arranged in perfect geometric patterns, creating a chamber that hummed with quiet energy. Lisa approached one of the larger crystals and carefully connected her portable scanner. These crystals contain massive amounts of data. "It's like they're storing the entire knowledge of whoever built this ship." As her scanner worked, the crystals began to glow brighter. Suddenly, the room filled with holographic images that danced through the air around them. The team watched in amazement as the images showed the rise and fall of a great civilization, with cities that spanned entire continents and ships that could travel between stars in the blink of an eye. But then the images changed, showing something that made Jake's blood run cold. A darkness spread across the galaxy, consuming planets and entire solar systems. The beings in the images fought bravely, but they were absorbed into something vast and hungry. Their ships, their technology, their very thoughts became part of a collective mind that grew stronger with each victory. "My God," whispered Lisa as the translation software began to decode the alien language. "They call it the convergence. It's some kind of collective consciousness that absorbs other species. It takes everything they are and makes it part of itself." The EI holographic display showed the final battle of the aliens who had built this ship. They fought desperately against enemies that had once been their friends and allies, now turned into extensions of the Convergence's will. The ship they were standing in had been one of the last to escape, carrying the knowledge of their civilization into the void. Tony stepped closer to examine one particular image that showed creatures that looked almost human. "Captain, look at this. These beings, they're talking about something called the young defiant ones. The translation is rough, but it sounds like they're describing us." Jake studied the image. The creatures in the hologram were definitely humanoid, with 2 arms, 2 legs, and faces that expressed emotions he could recognize. But what caught his attention was the way they were shown standing apart from other species, refusing to bow down even when facing impossible odds. "There's more," Lisa said, her voice tight with worry. "According to this data, the convergence isn't gone. It's been sleeping, waiting for something. And now it's starting to wake up." The crystal display showed star charts that Jake recognized. Several systems on the outer rim of human space were marked with symbols that could only mean one thing. The convergence had already begun its advance toward Earth. Maria grabbed Jake's arm. "Captain, we need to leave now. The sensors are picking up movement in this sector. Something big is coming our way." They quickly gathered as much data as they could carry and headed back to their shuttle. As they prepared to leave the alien derelict, Jake took one last look at the crystal chamber. The knowledge contained in those crystals represented the accumulated wisdom of an entire civilization, and now it was humanity's responsibility to learn from their warnings. The shuttle raced back to the Meridian as unknown contacts appeared on their sensors. Jake ordered the ship to jump to hyperspace, just as 3 massive vessels emerged from the nebula's depths. The last thing their sensors recorded was the alien derelict being torn apart by weapons that turned matter itself into energy. As the Meridian fled toward Earth, Jake knew their lives had just changed forever. Somewhere in the darkness between the stars, an ancient enemy was stirring, and humanity might be the galaxy's last hope of stopping it. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood at the massive viewing window of Luna Station, watching Earth turn slowly in the distance. The blue and white marble looked peaceful from here, but Kate knew that peace might not last much longer. Behind her, the emergency council meeting was about to begin, and she dreaded what she would have to tell them. Captain Jake Morrison had arrived 3 days ago with news that changed everything. The data from the alien derelict was clear. Something called the convergence was moving through space, absorbing entire civilizations. And according to ancient records, humanity was somehow important to stopping it. "Admiral, they're ready for you," said Commander Rick Powell as he entered the observation deck. Rick led the Ranger Corps, humanity's elite special forces unit. He was a tall man with steady hands and eyes that had seen too much combat. Kate trusted his judgment more than most people in the fleet. The council chamber buzzed with worried voices as Kate entered. Representatives from 12 different alien species sat around the curved table, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and electronic tones. At the head of the table sat Ambassador Zenth of the Altarian Empire, his blue skin showing the silver markings that indicated high rank among his people. "Admiral Sullivan," Zenth began, his voice carrying the authority of a species that had ruled space for over 2,000 years. "We have reviewed your Captain Morrison's report. While the data is interesting, we find it difficult to believe that humanity, so new to galactic society, has stumbled upon a threat that escaped our notice." Kate felt her jaw tighten. She had expected this reaction. The older species saw humans as violent newcomers who shot first and asked questions later. They forgot that sometimes violence was the right answer. Ambassador, our scientists have verified the data multiple times. The convergence is real, and it's already moving toward the core systems. We've lost contact with 4 outer rim colonies in the past week. Colony systems fail all the time, interrupted Senator Vex of the Cedian Confederacy. The insect-like being's compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights as he spoke. Equipment breaks down, communications fail. There could be a dozen explanations that don't involve ancient monsters from space. Dr. Helen Carter, Director of Advanced Weapons Research, stepped forward with a data pad in her hands. Helen was one of the smartest people Kate had ever met, and she had been working around the clock since Morrison's return. Senators, we've analyzed the energy signatures from the sites where colonies went silent. They match the weapon patterns described in the alien records. Even if this convergence exists, Zenth continued, why should we believe that humans are the key to stopping it? Your species has been in space for less than 300 years. We have been exploring the galaxy since before your planet had complex life. Kate walked to the center of the chamber, looking each representative in their various types of eyes. Because we're different. The records show that the convergence works by absorbing the knowledge and thoughts of other species. It turns their own strengths against them. But humans think differently. We're unpredictable, chaotic, and we don't give up easily. Exactly our point, Zenth replied, with what passed for a smile among his people. Your species is known for its aggression and inability to follow proper procedures. These are not qualities that inspire confidence. Before Kate could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed as the emergency communication system activated. A young communications officer ran into the chamber, his face pale with shock. Admiral, we're receiving distress signals from the Altarian home system. They're under attack by unknown forces. The entire system is going dark. The chamber fell silent. The Altarian home system was the most heavily defended location in the galaxy, protected by thousands of ships and orbital defense platforms. If something could attack it successfully, then nowhere was safe. Zenth stood up slowly, his silver markings now glowing bright with alarm. That's impossible. Our defenses are impenetrable. No force in the galaxy could penetrate our shields. No known force, Kate corrected. But the convergence isn't from this time. It has technology that's thousands of years more advanced than ours. The next few hours brought a stream of terrible news. The Altarian system didn't just fall, it disappeared completely. Every ship, every station, every living being simply vanished without a trace. Long-range sensors showed only empty space where once the greatest civilization in the galaxy had thrived. Rick Powell found Kate in her private office hours later, staring at tactical displays that showed refugee ships fleeing toward human space. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. The same species that had dismissed humanity as barbaric were now running to them for protection. The Council is panicking, Rick reported as he sat down across from her desk. Half of them want to surrender immediately. The other half want to hide and hope the convergence doesn't find them. Kate rubbed her tired eyes. She hadn't slept in 36 hours, and the weight of command felt heavier than ever. What's our status? Dr. Carter thinks she's found something in the alien data that might help. Apparently, the convergence has a weakness. It can't handle truly random behavior. Every species it's absorbed so far has been logical, predictable. They followed patterns that the convergence could learn and counter. But humans don't follow patterns. Exactly. We do stupid things for emotional reasons. We take risks that make no logical sense. We fight when we should run, and sometimes we win because nobody expects it. Kate stood up and walked to her window again. Earth looked the same as always, but she knew that was about to change. Rick, I want you to start gathering every ship we can find. Military vessels, cargo haulers, passenger liners, anything that can move and carry weapons. Ma'am, with respect, we can't fight this thing with converted freighters. Maybe not, but we're going to try. Kate turned back to face him. Send word to every human colony, every outpost, every ship in space. Tell them to come home. We're going to make our stand here in our own system. Rick nodded and headed for the door, but Kate called him back. And Rick, start working with Dr. Carter on those weapon designs. If she's right about the Convergence's weakness, we need to find a way to exploit it. Over the next 2 weeks, human space became a hub of desperate activity. Ships arrived daily from across the galaxy, some carrying refugees from destroyed worlds, others bringing news of the Convergence's advance. The alien collective had absorbed 3 more major civilizations, and each victory made it stronger and smarter. Dr. Carter worked with teams of scientists and engineers to develop new weapons based on the ancient alien data. The quantum disruption torpedo was her masterpiece, a weapon designed to sever the mental connections that held the Convergence together. But it required close-range delivery, and the targeting systems needed constant adjustment to stay ahead of the Convergence's learning algorithms. Captain Morrison trained with other ship commanders, teaching them tactics that relied on human unpredictability rather than standard fleet procedures. They practiced sudden course changes, random attack patterns, and strategies that made no logical sense but might confuse an enemy that expected rational behavior. Kate stood on Luna Station's command deck, watching the largest fleet in human history assemble around Earth. Over 3,000 ships of every size and type, from massive battleships to tiny scout vessels piloted by volunteers who had never seen combat. It wasn't the most powerful fleet ever assembled, but it might be the most determined. Admiral, Rick reported as he joined her at the observation window. Long-range sensors are picking up movement at the edge of the system. It's huge, bigger than anything we've ever seen. Kate nodded grimly. The Convergence had arrived, and humanity's moment of truth was about to begin. In the distance, she could see the first enemy ships emerging from hyperspace, their dark hulls reflecting no light as they moved toward Earth with terrible purpose. The Convergence fleet filled the darkness of space like a spreading disease. Admiral Kate Sullivan watched from Luna Station as hundreds of alien ships moved toward Earth with perfect coordination. Each vessel was different, built by the civilizations the Convergence had absorbed, but they all moved as one mind with one terrible purpose. Status report, Kate ordered as her command staff gathered around the tactical display. The human fleet called the Defiant was spread across the solar system, 3,000 ships waiting for her orders. Enemy fleet consists of over 800 vessels, reported Lieutenant Colonel Sam Hughes, their new tactical officer. Sam was young but brilliant, able to see patterns in battle that others missed. They're maintaining perfect formation. No wasted movement, no unnecessary communication. It's like watching a machine. Captain Jake Morrison stood beside the display, his face grim as he studied the enemy positions. After returning from the alien derelict, he had been promoted to Commodore and given command of the reconnaissance wing. They're not just ships anymore. They're extensions of the Convergence's will. Every captain, every crew member, they're all part of the same mind now. Kate nodded. She had read the reports from the Altarian system. The few escape pods that had made it out told horrible stories of friends and family members suddenly turning against them, their eyes blank and empty as they spoke with the Convergence's voice. Dr. Carter, what's the status on our special weapons? Dr. Helen Carter looked up from her portable workstation, her hand shaking slightly from too much coffee and too little sleep. The quantum disruption torpedoes are ready, but we only have 50 of them. Each one has to be delivered at close range, and the targeting computers need constant manual adjustment to stay ahead of the Convergence's adaptation algorithms. 50 shots against 800 ships, muttered Commander Rick Powell as he checked his equipment. Rick would be leading the special assault teams if they got close enough to board enemy vessels. Those aren't good odds. When have humans ever worried about good odds? Kate replied with a tight smile. Jake, I need you to take the Meridian deep into enemy territory. Find their command center, their nexus point. If we can disrupt their central coordination, maybe we can give the fleet a fighting chance. Jake nodded without hesitation. My crew is ready, Admiral, but if we go in there, we're not coming back. I know, Kate said quietly, but if we don't try, nobody's coming back. 2 hours later, the Meridian slipped away from the main fleet using experimental stealth technology that Dr. Carter's team had developed. The ship's hull was covered with panels that absorbed sensor waves, making it nearly invisible to enemy detection systems. But the technology was untested, and Jake knew they were betting everything on equipment that might fail at the worst possible moment. Dr. Lisa Park worked frantically at her science station as they moved through the outer edge of the Convergence fleet. "I'm picking up massive energy readings from the center of their formation. There's something big in there, something that's coordinating all the other ships." Lieutenant Commander Tony Blake kept watch at the weapons console, his finger hovering over the firing controls. Around them, Convergence ships drifted past like sleeping giants, their hulls covered with organic growths that pulsed with sickly light. "This is wrong," he whispered. "Ships aren't supposed to look alive." Marine Colonel Beth Williams prepared, her assault team in the cargo bay. Beth was a veteran of the border wars, tough as steel and twice as sharp. She had volunteered for this mission knowing it was probably suicide, but someone had to try. "Remember, if we get aboard one of their ships, we're dealing with people who used to be like us. They're not evil, they're victims, but they'll still try to kill us." As the Meridian moved deeper into enemy territory, they began to see the true horror of what the Convergence had become. Ships that had once belonged to peaceful trading species now bristled with weapons grown from living metal. Vessels designed for exploration and diplomacy had been twisted into instruments of war and absorption. "There," Lisa pointed at her scanner display. "The energy source is coming from that massive structure in the center. It's not a ship, it's something else entirely." Jake stared at the main screen as their target came into view. The Nexus was a nightmare fusion of technology and biology, built from the merged remains of countless worlds and civilizations. Organic tubes connected different sections, pulsing with energy that flowed between absorbed minds. At its center sat what looked like a massive brain, kilometers wide and surrounded by crystalline structures that amplified its thoughts across the entire fleet. "My God," breathed Tony. "It's not just controlling them. It's become them. Every person the Convergence has absorbed is still in there, their consciousness trapped inside that thing." Before Jake could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Their stealth systems had failed and Convergence ships were moving to intercept them. But instead of attacking immediately, the enemy vessels formed a perfect circle around the Meridian, trapping them without firing a shot. A voice spoke through their communication system, but it wasn't coming from any single ship. It was the combined voice of billions of absorbed minds speaking as one. "Humans, the young defiant ones. We have been waiting for you." Jake activated the main view screen and found himself face to face with the Convergence itself. The image showed not one being but hundreds, all speaking in perfect unison. He recognized some of the faces from species that had recently been absorbed. Their eyes were empty, but their voices carried in terrible certainty. "You cannot stop us," the Convergence continued. "We have absorbed the knowledge of 1,000 civilizations. We know every strategy, every weapon, every possible move you might make. Your resistance is futile." "Maybe," Jake replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "But we're going to try anyway. That's what humans do." "Yes. We have studied your species extensively. Your unpredictability is interesting, but ultimately meaningless. Join us willingly, and your absorption will be painless. Resist and you will suffer as your individuality is stripped away piece by piece." Jake looked around at his crew. Lisa was still working at her station, trying to find a weakness in the Nexus. Tony had his hand on the weapons controls, ready to fight even against impossible odds. In the cargo bay, Beth and her Marines were preparing for battle they couldn't win. They were all afraid, but none of them were backing down. "Here's our answer," Jake said, and gave the order to attack. The Meridian opened fire with everything it had, quantum torpedoes and pulse cannons lighting up the darkness. The Convergence ships responded instantly, their combined firepower turning space around the small human vessel into a storm of energy and destruction. But something unexpected happened. As the battle raged, other human ships throughout the system began to move in random, chaotic patterns. They ignored standard fleet formations and tactical doctrine. each captain making decisions based on instinct and emotion rather than logic. The Convergence tried to predict their movements but failed, its perfect coordination suddenly becoming a weakness as it struggled to adapt to truly random behavior. Back on Luna Station, Admiral Kate Sullivan watched the battle unfold on her tactical displays. The Meridian was surrounded and outgunned, but Jake's attack had created the distraction they needed. "All ships," she broadcast to the human fleet, "begin the final assault. Remember, don't think too hard about what you're doing. Trust your instincts and fight like humans." 3,000 ships charged toward the Convergence fleet in a wave of beautiful chaos, each one following its own path toward battle. For the first time in millennia, the Convergence encountered an enemy it couldn't understand or predict, and the galaxy's fate hung in the balance. The battle raged across the solar system as 3,000 human ships fought against the Convergence fleet. Space lit up with weapons fire as vessels twisted and turned in patterns that made no tactical sense. Admiral Kate Sullivan watched from Luna Station as her pilots ignored every rule of space combat, following their hearts instead of their training. "Admiral, we're actually winning," reported Lieutenant Colonel Sam Hughes, his voice filled with amazement. "The Convergence ships keep trying to predict our movements, but they can't. Every time they think they know what we're going to do, we do something completely different." On the main battle display, Kate could see the chaos unfolding. A cargo ship converted for battle suddenly reversed course and rammed straight into a Convergence cruiser. A squadron of fighters broke formation to chase a single enemy vessel, only to accidentally stumble into the perfect position to attack another target. It was madness, but it was working. Deep in enemy territory, Commodore Jake Morrison fought to keep the Meridian alive as Convergence ships closed in from all sides. His hull was damaged, his shields were failing, and half his weapons were offline. But he had accomplished his mission. The quantum disruption torpedoes were locked onto the massive nexus at the center of the enemy fleet. "Lisa, are you ready?" Jake called out as another enemy blast shook the ship. Dr. Lisa Park worked frantically at her console, her hands flying over the controls as she made final adjustments to the torpedo guidance systems. "Almost there, Captain. But the Convergence is adapting faster than I expected. I can only keep the targeting lock for another 30 seconds. Lieutenant Commander Tony Blake fired the ship's remaining weapons at the approaching enemies, buying them precious time. "Whatever you're going to do it now. We've got company and they're not here to talk." Jake looked around at his crew one last time. These people had followed him into the heart of enemy territory, knowing they probably wouldn't survive. They were heroes, every one of them, and he was proud to serve with them. "Fire all torpedoes," the quantum disruption weapons launched from the Meridian's torpedo tubes, streaking toward the nexus like arrows of pure energy. The Convergence tried to intercept them, but the torpedoes' erratic flight patterns made them impossible to track. One by one, they struck the massive organic structure at the center of the enemy fleet. The effect was immediate and devastating. Bolts of quantum energy tore through the nexus, severing the mental connections that held the Convergence together. The massive brain at its center convulsed as billions of absorbed minds suddenly found themselves free for the first time in centuries. Across the Convergence fleet, ships suddenly stopped moving in perfect coordination. Captains who had been part of the collective mind for decades suddenly remembered who they used to be. Altarian commanders found themselves fighting alongside Cetian engineers against the very force that had enslaved them. But the victory came at a terrible cost. The Convergence, realizing it was losing control, turned its full attention to destroying the Meridian. Energy beams from dozens of ships converged on Jake's vessel, overwhelming its shields and tearing through the hull. "Hull breach on all decks," reported Tony as emergency lights flashed throughout the ship. "Life support is failing. We've got maybe 5 minutes before this ship comes apart." Jake activated the ship-wide communication system one last time. "This is the captain. It's been an honor serving with all of you. We came here to buy our people time, and we've done that. The galaxy will remember what we accomplished here today." Dr. Lisa Park looked up from her station, her face calm despite the chaos around them. "Captain, the disruption field is spreading. It's reaching ships throughout their fleet. We did it. We actually did it." As the meridian died around them, Jake watched the battle through the main view screen. Human ships were pushing deeper into enemy territory, following the path his crew had opened. The Convergence fleet was falling apart as individual ships turned against each other, their crews fighting to reclaim their freedom. On Luna Station, Admiral Kate Sullivan saw the moment when everything changed. The enemy fleet that had moved, with perfect unity, suddenly became a collection of confused and frightened vessels. Some continued to fight, still under the Convergence's influence, but others began firing on their former allies as liberated crews fought to break free. "All ships press the attack," Kate ordered. "Don't give them time to regroup. This is our chance to end this once and for all." Commander Rick Powell led his Rangers in boarding actions against Convergence vessels that had stopped fighting. They found crews in various states of mental freedom, some fully aware of what had happened to them, others still partially connected to the collective mind. The Rangers worked to free as many as possible while securing the ship's weapon systems. Dr. Helen Carter monitored the quantum disruption field from her laboratory, watching as it continued to spread through the enemy fleet. "Admiral, the field is self-sustaining now. Every mind it frees adds to its power. The Convergence is losing control faster than it can adapt." But the collective consciousness wasn't finished. In a final act of desperation, it began to destroy its own ships rather than let them fall into enemy hands. Vessels throughout the fleet turned their weapons on themselves, creating massive explosions that lit up the darkness of space. Marine Colonel Beth Williams found herself aboard one of the dying Convergence ships, helping confused alien crew members escape to safety. "This way," she shouted over the sound of alarms and explosions. "Everyone to the escape pods, we're getting you out of here." An Altarian engineer grabbed her arm, his silver markings flickering with emotion. "How long?" he asked in broken English. "How long was I trapped?" 3 months, Beth replied gently. "But you're free now. That's what matters." The battle lasted another 6 hours, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Ship by ship, the Convergence fleet either surrendered or destroyed itself rather than face freedom. By the time the sun rose over Earth, space around the planet was filled with debris from the greatest battle in galactic history. Kate stood in the observation deck of Luna Station, looking out at the aftermath. Rescue ships moved between the wreckage, searching for survivors from both sides. The Convergence was finished, its collective mind shattered beyond repair, but the cost had been enormous. "Final casualty reports, Admiral," Sam Hughes said quietly as he joined her at the window. "We lost 437 ships. Over 15,000 crew members didn't make it home." Kate nodded, feeling the weight of every lost life. "And the Convergence fleet?" "Most of their ships were destroyed, but we rescued over 2 million beings from various species. They're confused and traumatized, but they're alive and free." In the weeks that followed, the galaxy began to rebuild. Representatives from dozens of liberated species gathered on Earth to form a new galactic alliance based on individual freedom, rather than collective control. The old empires that had dismissed humanity as barbaric newcomers now looked to them for leadership. Admiral Kate Sullivan found herself appointed as the first supreme commander of the Allied fleet, tasked with ensuring that nothing like the Convergence could ever threaten the galaxy again. She accepted the position with humility, knowing that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their weapons or their technology, but their refusal to give up hope, even when facing impossible odds. A monument was built on Luna Station to honor the crew of the Meridian and all those who had died in the battle. The inscription was simple but powerful, carved in dozens of languages from across the galaxy. It read, "In our defiance, we found our destiny. In our differences, we discovered our strength." Across the stars, legends told of those who would not yield. We chose to be those legends. Jake Morrison's final words became a rallying cry for the new alliance. "We'd rather burn as individuals than live as echoes." The phrase was taught in schools throughout human space and beyond, reminding future generations that freedom was worth any price. Years later, when alien children asked their parents about the Great War, they were told about the humans who saved. The galaxy not through superior technology or greater numbers, but through the simple refusal to surrender their individuality. They were the species that chose chaos over control, freedom over safety, and hope over despair. The legends spoke. Truly across the stars, and humanity had proven worthy of the stories told about them.